Hi, Purpose Partner. Welcome to another episode of Rise to Your Purpose, a personal and spiritual development podcast for female entrepreneurs with a mission. We are your hosts, Brandie and Natalie.
We are founders of Victorious Entrepreneurs Rising, where we guide women to build profitable businesses online through diversifying your income, using kingdom principles in marketing, and operating in a spirit of rest so that you can create kingdom impact.
After this episode, be sure to join our Purpose Partner Facebook community and get your copy of our Rise to Your Purpose devotional so we can continue to serve you as we partner together in our faith and business. Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to another episode of Rise to Your Purpose. Today, we're going to be taking the conversation pretty in a different location than we're normally used to. Normally, if you're listening to this podcast, we are talking about business strategies, partnering with God in your faith and business. But today, I really wanted to bring up an important topic that I have found to impact my life and business. And so we are going to have a special guest. Her name is Jannette Carlos, and she is a nurse and is also studying to be a more holistic practitioner in her field. And so we're going to be talking about building your business around your flow, aka your menstrual cycle, and why this is so important for you to understand your cycle and your flow and how it actually does impact your life and your business. So God designed us in a very unique way. He gave us our body in a unique way, and it talks to us if we're willing to listen to it. And so if you're, showing up one day and you're like, I feel unmotivated, I'm feeling exhausted, and the next day maybe you have all this energy, well, we're going to dive into why that matters, how to really understand when it's the best time to work around your business and your flow so that you can actually be more productive during higher quality times of the month when you're more energetic, and give yourself space to rest and recoup during times of the month where you're not going to be able to be at your highest self. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. I would love to hear any feedback that you guys have or any aha moments. You can always tag me at Live Victorious. So I hope you enjoy the episode. All right, welcome to another episode of Rise to Your Purpose. I am so excited to have a special guest on today. But first, for those of you who are new, welcome. My name is Brandie Thomas. I'm one of the founders of Victorious Entrepreneurs Rising, along with my sister and usual co-host, Natalie Lawson. But today, we have a special guest here. Her name is Jannette, or I call her JJ, and so you may see her as either her name on social media. But JJ is a registered nurse for over a decade, and although the majority of her career was spent at the bedside in ICU, her own patient experiences navigating unexplained infertility and debilitating symptoms of health crisis gave her the resolve to find answers in the medical field that was not designed to support chronic illnesses. So let me step back for a minute, because Jannette, she is a nurse, but we are going to be talking about your flow and how it actually impacts your business. So ladies, buckle up, because this is going to be such an exciting conversation. And I'm so excited for you to hear her story and hear more of my story, because I know I've shared on the podcast my infertility journey and just my healing journey and how that has impacted my business. And so today I wanted to talk to you guys about just building your business around your flow, aka your menstrual cycle. And so we're going to kind of get deep into this today, but I really wanted to introduce you guys to JJ. She actually teaches reproductive health to empower women to connect with one of our most sacred parts of our creation, and that's our fertility. And so it is her belief that in order to show up fully and conscious in every aspect of our lives, that we must first learn to show up for ourselves. And we cannot do that unless we actually understand our basic physiology and our purpose. So I'm really excited to just talk to JJ, have her share her story, and then just educate us on why it is important to understand our body and how our bodies work, and why we may feel certain ways throughout the month and how that can actually impact our lives and our businesses. So JJ, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining. Feel free to elaborate on your story and your testimony. We would love to just hear more from you.
Thank you so much, Brandie. It's such a delight to be here with you and to talk to your listeners. You hit it right on the money. I mean, you kind of gave my backstory a little bit and really what drove me to kind of leave the ICU for a side a little bit and try to focus on uh, our fertility, which is something that is essentially not appropriately taught in medical schools or
Mhm.
nursing schools. And so, what happens is that we go to our doctors for information about our health when it comes to our reproduction. And oftentimes, we're not being really educated on how our bodies truly work.
Right.
In my case, as you mentioned, I had to find out that I had like unexplained infertility and I had to dig up answers because I just wasn't buying that diagnosis. I knew that
Right.
if my body could not get pregnant, it was a symptom of something that was happening inside my body.
Mhm.
And so this really just led me to find fertility awareness, which is the topic that we're going to be discovering today. I do not have a big background in business aspects. However, knowing what I know about fertility awareness and how my body functions, I truly believe that anybody who is doing anything in the world and is bleeding through a menstruation deserves to know how their bodies work because when you described it, when you understand how
Mhm.
your inner body is reacting to your surroundings, you know how to show up more gracefully, more
Right.
beautifully, and more empowered.
Yes. Yeah, and the whole for those of you listening, the whole reason like I reached out to JJ is because I'm like, oh my gosh, JJ, I thought so her and I we met in a Christian infertility support group on Facebook. So we've been friends for a few years now. We've never actually physically been able to meet yet, but that's definitely on our bucket list. I feel like at least for me trying to
Yes.
figure it out how to get that in-person meeting. But I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so tired. I just feel unmotivated and I know I'm getting ready to start my cycle." And it was actually impacting me showing up for my business. And I was like, "Ah, JJ, this would be such a great topic to bring to our podcast listeners." And so she obviously said yes to that conversation. So that's why we're here. That's kind of the backstory of how we got to this conversation, because I do feel like it is important for us to understand our bodies. And like you were saying, JJ, that we are just not educated on our bodies, on the symptoms that our body, like how our body actually speaks to us, and why do we feel, energized and motivated one moment, and then the next moment we're like so drained and exhausted and like and nothing really changed significantly, but our bodies are changing and going through processes that we don't understand or we're not listening to them. So I would love for you to share with us what are the phases of our cycles and why it's important for us to understand them.
Yes, absolutely. I love this question. So let's backtrack a little bit, okay? So, because in order to understand this concept a little bit better, we need to dismantle a huge misconception that is commonly had amongst most women. And don't feel bad because I am a nurse and I did not know either, okay? So we're
Okay.
all in the same boat. You see, most of us are actually kind of pretty good about expecting our periods and perhaps even
Mhm.
planning for the day that it's about to arrive. But did you know that your period is actually not the main event of your menstrual cycle? A lot of us
Yeah.
were not aware of that. Yeah. I know you and I have had previous conversations,
Mhm.
so I figured maybe you may uh, understand a little bit more of what I
Yeah.
mean by that. But again, most of us are rarely aware that our entire menstrual cycle actually revolves around ovulation.
Mhm.
This is very important to know as we explore the three other phases of our cycle, because everything else that is happening in our bodies on any given day is happening in preparation for or as a result of
Okay.
ovulation. Yeah. So let's break up these phases here so we can kind of conceptualize everything. So your menstrual cycle consists of four phases. You can think of these in the terms of the seasons like winter, spring, summer, and fall. I know when I first heard this description, it got me really excited and it was just like a light bulb went up in my brain and
Mhm.
I'm like, oh my God, that makes sense. So I'm going to use the same analogy. I do not claim it, but women who have been teaching fertility awareness swear by this, and I'm all by it because it truly makes sense. So let's start off with winter. This is your period. So we call this a period because a period is literally a period in time in the entirety of your menstrual cycle.
Mhm.
So much like winter is a season of barrenness and drawing up close to the fireplace and just eating nourishing foods, your period reflects this, as this is a time in which the lining of your uterus is shedding. You are typically wanting to be more at home, wearing oversized sweaters, you're drawing inward, and you're probably eating chocolate. I don't know. I mean, just
Mhm.
imagine yourself going through that phase. This typically lasts around 4 to 6 days. Now, as winter comes to an end, we are welcoming spring. This is what we call the follicular phase. A lot of us like to be in this stage because this is a time when there is like an obvious change in temperature. You know, the flowers begin to bloom in preparation for the
Mhm.
height of the summer. Well, similarly, your body is done shedding its lining. So your ovaries are now preparing for the big day. And it does this by creating cervical mucus or cervical fluid. That's kind of the medical term. Um, and what this is, if you've never heard of it, is that this is a clear to white discharge that is produced by your cervix. And you can typically see it when you go to the bathroom and wipe. Um, this also changes in consistency to indicate your prime fertile days. Your energy around this time is increasing. You are likely more tolerant of people and more patient. Um, from an evolutionary standpoint, just think that you were created to procreate. So everything that your body is doing right now, whether you are married or not, it's really to try to get your body pregnant. So your body is the key hormone here that is driving the show is estrogen. And so estrogen is our friend here because, believe it or not, around this time, and I don't know if you can relate to this, Brandie, but even your facial features begin to change a little bit. Your face becomes more symmetrical, so you
Okay.
you look and you feel prettier. Your clothes
Mhm.
likely fits really nice around this time. You're feeling very extroverted. You're flirty in nature, and you're typically like very comfortable in large crowds. So again, just think of the
Mhm.
energy of the springtime. This is exactly what's happening. This phase usually lasts around from the time that your period ends until the day that you ovulate. So let's just say possibly in a regular cycle up to 7 days. So then we move on to the summertime. This is the main event, ovulation. At this time, you are at the prime of your enchanting phase here. Again, speaking from an evolutionary standpoint, your libido tends to be really high around this time. You're very flirty in nature with your partner. Again, you typically look really good in your clothes and you are very, very energetic. Uh, as far as physiological
Mhm.
signs, your cervical fluid that we just discussed tends to be a little bit more lubricative in nature, and it commonly resembles clear egg whites. So I wanted to make that distinction because a lot of us are not
Mhm.
really taught about cervical mucus.
Right.
Um, and when we see it in our underwear or when we're wiping, we think it's disgusting or we think it's an infection. So it's just it creates this knowledge base in our head just to understand that this is perfectly normal. So it's important to note that ovulation varies from person to person. We have been taught that most women ovulate on cycle day 14 of their cycles. Have you heard that, Brandy?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So, okay, get this. Newer research is showing that actually less than 20% of women actually ovulate on day 14. This is really important to remember because there's no such thing as saying, like, oh, I always ovulate on day 12 or I always
Mhm.
ovulate on day 14. This date really changes from cycle to cycle, and it's very sensitive to the food that we're eating, to the stresses in our bodies, to fitness, our fitness routine. Like
Mhm.
anything can throw off ovulation. So one of the main components of fertility awareness is trying to get into the habit of tracking that day. It's more like tracking ovulation rather than tracking a period.
Mhm.
Now, um, The other important thing to know about this is that because it changes significantly, it's important that you become informed if you're trying to use this information to prevent or achieve a pregnancy. More so to prevent, obviously, because if you are trusting your period app, it could be that you're not getting the right information. So as I said before, this is something to note, because your fertile window that shows up in your period apps, which is something that we as women tend to typically use, is not very reliable, again, because this is something that is relying on the idea that we ovulate on cycle day 14, and a lot of us actually don't do that. Yeah. So and then our last phase, I'm skipping out here. Our last phase is the fall. This is the luteal phase. So think again in terms of the seasons when the leaves are beginning to fall. The weather again is beginning to change a little bit more. So you are now drawing up closer to the fireplace. So now instead of wanting to be out in a party, you're actually craving more intimate conversations. You want to be indoors. You kind of return home to yourself. So a lot of these terms may be a little foreign to somebody who hasn't really paid attention, but if you are listening to this and you're just kind of thinking about how you go about your days and the things that you normally gravitate, you may find that this is actually ringing some bells in your head. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Thank you so much for going through that. Cause I think, at least in my education, nobody ever explained the 4 seasons of our cycle. And I think that was really helpful just to have that like metaphor for us to grasp onto, because it does make sense. It's like, yes, like when I'm gearing up for my period, I am more tired. I just kind of like want to be in my own headspace. Like I just want to be by myself. I'm not really wanting to be out in the public much. My energy's lower, like showing up to do speaking engagements or showing up to do a Facebook Live is more difficult. So that's, again, like bringing it back to the business realm, why I feel like this was such an important topic, because I know I'm not the only one that wasn't educated on my body. And I'm so grateful, like, honestly, JJ is the whole reason I even got into tracking my cycle outside of an app. And so I'm really excited for you to share with us. I know we both love the NAPRO and Creighton method of tracking. But if you have others you want to talk about, please feel free to do so. But what are some different ways that we can actually track our cycles so that we know when we're in these different seasons?
Yes, that is such an informed question, Brandie, because again, a lot of us are thinking that when someone asks, do you track your cycle? It really means like, oh, I have my period app and I know when my period started, and I know at most somebody maybe typically knows how long the length of their cycle is. However, in the terms of fertility awareness, this is an umbrella term that describes different types of fertility charting. This is usually learned through a trained instructor because they've received a lot of schooling. These methods can sometimes be used to prevent a pregnancy or achieve a pregnancy, but I cannot drive this point enough that for me, it's this learning about your fertility. We need to stop thinking of it in terms of pregnancy, because your hormones and your fertility do way more than get you pregnant. And they really are a reflection of your overall health. So if you're here claiming that you're a healthy eater and that you're exercising, but you have no idea what your menstrual cycle is telling you, you're missing a big component here. So I really encourage anybody who's listening, who's really into wellness and just wanting to feel good, starting with your cycle is a great place to start. And I guess since we were talking about period apps, we could I'll start by describing essentially 2 categories of charting, which is a statistical type and an observational type. The statistical type of methods are like your period apps, and something that is a little less commonly known but more popular back in the day was the rhythm method. These methods are typically unreliable to prevent pregnancy because they rely on estimations or old data based on your last menstrual period. Yeah, so this is why we say that period apps are typically not very reliable. And I really cannot drive this enough to be sure that if you're trying to avoid a pregnancy, you're not using those apps that are telling you the little green light, you're fertile around this time. This kind of differentiates from observational methods in that the observational methods work because you are collecting data the day of to determine on any given day whether you are fertile or infertile. You are either one or the other. And as you can see, the observational methods tend to be a little bit more reliable because, again, they are being based on something that is occurring in real time and not on something that occurred in the past. If you're listening and you like to take notes, this is probably one of the times where you could probably make a little diagram. So I'm going to break down the observational methods into 4 categories, just so that we can wrap our heads, because to go into all the methods would just turn into this huge long conversation. We won't have time for that. But a very, very easy way to track this would be to break them down in the 4 methods. So we'll start off by the first method is the symptothermal method. This category requires that a woman charts her cervical fluid and basal body temperature. I talked about the cervical fluid before, which is essentially a reflection of what estrogen is doing in your body. So when estrogen is high during the first half of your cycle, you're going to see that cervical fluid. In the second half of your cycle, when progesterone is high, that's the hormone that runs that side of the cycle, you're going to see that basal body temperatures, if you do start to check them throughout your cycle, there's going to be essentially 2 different types of one is going to be lower temperatures and one is higher. So when you're graphing your temperatures throughout your cycle after ovulation, you're going to tend to see a pattern that is higher. So we're not going to get into the details of that, but essentially symptothermal, think 2, you're thinking cervical mucus and temperature. Examples of these methods can include the SymptoPro method or Sensiplan. These methods are also, as I mentioned, highly reliable for avoiding pregnancy when working with a trained instructor. And then these lead us into the symptohormonal methods. This is category number 2. These differ from the above ones because this tracks cervical mucus and hormones. So by cervical mucus, it's essentially the same thing as I described in the other method. And as far as hormones, depending on the method that you use, you're either going to track your LH search or your estrogen. Types of methods that fall under this category include the FEM method or the Creighton method. Again, these are also very reliable for avoiding pregnancy if that's what you choose. But again, also all of these just help you kind of get in tune with your body. This moves us on to the 3rd category, which are mucus only methods. These are the types of methods where you're not charting anything other than your cervical fluid during your fertile phase. And the examples of these methods include the Creighton model, which is the one that you and I, Brandie, got connected over and started using NAPRO technology, which is another conversation in itself. And another great one is the Billings method. So again, these rely only on cervical mucus. It's a great resource for just knowing your overall health. Again, the Creighton method is attached to the medical management aspect. So you can find some doctors out there that are trained to read your menstrual chart and help you get diagnosed or just help treat some hormonal imbalances. And finally, the last type is the temperature only methods. Examples of these include the standard days or DAYSes. These methods tend to be a little bit more popular in the femtech industry. So there is a possibility that some of your listeners may have seen a lot of marketing for these things. I will say that a lot of fertility awareness educators are not fans of these types of methods because they are not as reliable for preventing pregnancy because they only rely on progesterone. And the interesting thing to note about progesterone is that when you chart basal body temperature to see what progesterone is doing in your body, this cannot help you identify ovulation. It can only confirm when ovulation has occurred. So again, I'm not saying that this is a bad method to use, because this could be a great method for someone who's trying to get pregnant, or someone who's just curious about learning about their body, but doesn't want to learn cervical fluid. But again, if you are thinking in the terms of preventing a pregnancy, this is probably a category that you may not want to use just for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the categories.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much for explaining that. 'Cause some of those I have not heard of at all. But yeah, like JJ said, I do use Creighton method of tracking, and that actually gave me answers to my unexplained infertility that my regular OBGYN was, she wasn't, I think, just uneducated in that aspect. And so I was so blessed to find a NAPRO doctor who, also specializes in Creighton, like understanding your chart and then taking you on a health journey to either diagnose other underlying issues or diseases, or help you with hormone balances. So that was my specific journey, was I found I was not producing enough cervical mucus and therefore was not able to achieve pregnancy, and that just gave me so much closure. So that's just to say, ladies that are listening to this, like, why it's so important for us to actually understand what our bodies are doing, because it does impact I feel like it impacts just every aspect of our lives. Like, whether you want to be pregnant, whether you don't want to be pregnant, whether you're like out, like way past that phase of pregnancy, like you still need to understand, like, what is your body going through? What are your hormones doing? What are their symptoms that are telling you that there's something else going on that you can actually take control of and take steps to hopefully either mend or at least be aware of what you can do to prevent or just stabilize whatever is going on in your body. Like, we don't have to be, I think the biggest thing for me is, like, I don't have to have cramps. I don't have to feel sick all the time because of my period, but like, our society makes us feel like that's normal, and it's not normal. We shouldn't be suppressing those symptoms. That's our body actually telling us that there's something wrong that we need to be aware of. And so and that's, again, bringing this back to the business world. Like, if you're in the business world and you're trying to run a business and you're trying to show up for your clients and your customers and create and be creative and do all the things that we have to do in businesses, but you're constantly feeling sick, or you're feeling tired, or there's just other things going on in your body and you don't know why, like, that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because it is important. And it does impact our businesses. It impacts our relationships. It impacts how we show up day to day. So I really appreciate, JJ, you coming on here and just educating us on that, because I know for me, like, I haven't heard probably half of this conversation. I learned a lot. Like, you guys need to go follow JJ on Instagram and Facebook. Like, we'll post her, how you can reach out to her in the show notes too. But on the topic of how this impacts our lives and our businesses and relationships, what phases of our cycles should we do different types of activities so we can stay in the flow with our flow?
I love it. Well, first of all, Brandie, you just said a whole bunch of stuff that I could just piggyback off, because you and I have a very similar story,
right?
That it was through NAPRO technology and charting our menstrual cycle that we learned and we got a lot of answers to our infertility. And I relate a lot to that, where you get closure from just knowing these things. And infertility is such a funny topic, because it's something that it's so common, but no one is talking about it. So we just assume that this is just it doesn't really affect us, right? But like you said, this is far more than achieving a pregnancy or avoiding a pregnancy. This is truly health. And when you say that, if your periods are so bad that it's affecting your business, like, this should trigger you to think, okay, what is happening? What is going on? Unfortunately, the reality is that even if you do start to pay attention and question that you're taking too much Tylenol during your period, and you go see a doctor, at most, what they're going to do is offer you birth control. And we in the medical field have falsely, not I don't think intentionally, I don't think doctors lie to their patients, but through the education that we're receiving through the pharmaceutical companies, we're being told that birth control regulates women's cycles, but we have to understand that this is a band-aid. So whatever reason you're using birth control, aside from preventing a pregnancy, if it's for any medical reason, you have to understand that when you come off of birth control, that symptom is going to be there. So oftentimes this is tied into our reproduction. So while you're young in your early 20s, you may not be interested in a pregnancy. However, if you stay on birth control for 10 years and realize when you're 31 that you do want kids and that thing that you suppressed 10 years ago is still there, you got to understand that your egg quality is now significantly lower and you've been on birth control suppressing essentially red flags that have been coming up. So thank you for saying that, Brandie. It's really important for me to drive that point across, because again, for me, it's more than just achieving or preventing a pregnancy. This is your health. So I love the question that you ask, as far as living in our flow, because I know, especially as business entrepreneurs, you're likely very, very busy throughout your day. But I think fertility awareness is a great option in this case, for women to just be more cognizant about, especially because out of all the career options, entrepreneurs tend to be a little bit more flexible with the way that they dictate their schedule. And so I'll give you an example for me. I don't do anything at all unless I consult with my cycle. I know this is really weird, a really weird thing to think about. But just think about, maybe some of you have been planning this beach vacation. Maybe you may look at a calendar and say, I'm not going to go because I think my period's going to show up that week, right? You don't want to be in the beach swimsuit with your period. But that's as far as we take it. In my case, it's like literally every appointment that I make, every meeting that I have, every type of thing that requires me to do some internal work or outside work, it really depends on where I am in my cycle. And this means saying no to a lot, and as business entrepreneurs, sometimes that may sound a little bit scary, but I think as we explore how different we are on different parts of our body, we start to understand that when you say no to something, you're saying yes to a lot of other things. And there are things that come into play that just flow better when you are in the no. So you have to understand that whether or not you track, whether or not you want to know about your cycle is flowing with or without you.
Right.
And I don't know about you, Brandie, but sometimes life is just better when we go with the flow rather than fight it, right? So what I like to think of fertility awareness as essentially just learning how to listen. So think about, for anybody that's familiar with children, right? You're not going to talk to a 10-month-old baby the same way you're going to talk to a 5-year-old, or a 5-year-old the way that you're going to talk to a 10-year-old, and a 10-year-old the same way you would talk to a teenager. They're on different levels of communication. Well, your body was designed by God in such a beautiful way with a very unique roadmap. So guys don't get that, but we do. And just think for a moment of your feelings towards your period. If you're anything like me and most women, you probably don't like that time. You probably feel like this is horrible. We probably like to, even at times, and when we're not at our best, we just insult women and tell them that, oh, they're just hormonal, they're PMSing, or we make excuses for ourselves. Oh, I'm just PMSing, right? But that shouldn't be an excuse, especially when we understand that our creation was designed to give us this break. It's us with our mentality, which we try to fight that, and we try to, I guess, essentially not honor that part of our body that is screaming to us like, this is what I need. So again, physiologically, our hormones should essentially be telling us that things are going weird. If you're experiencing stress, if we are experiencing disease, if we are experiencing anything that's out of the normal, it's usually going to show up in our cycles. So when we learn how to listen, we can learn how to adjust better. I like to describe this better for visual learners. Like I describe the seasons, right? The fall, the winter, and the spring and the summer. So think of your body as two different people throughout the cycle. Essentially, the spring and the summer months, you're going to expect yourself to be very, very energetic. You're going to feel very empowered, very healthy. You're going to want to go on a run, and you feel very, very strong. If you are in a business aspect where you're working with other women, this is probably when you want to do your one-on-one calls, when you want to be connecting with people, when you want to be networking, when you want to be on camera. If you have a photo shoot, remember, this is when estrogen is making your face glow and feel beautiful. But similarly, when you are transitioning into the other aspect of your cycle, this is when you probably need a nap in the afternoon. This is when you're bloated. This is when you have pimples on your face. This is when you are more tired and you don't have patience for people as much. So it makes sense to want to rearrange the meetings and the schedules, the things that involve being outward into the community. Reserve those for the other half of the cycle. I sometimes think that we as women feel useless, or maybe like we're not being productive if we allow ourselves a nap or we allow ourselves to take a break. But just think of how much more productive you are after you give yourself that grace. Now, again, think of your body as this thing that is constantly communicating with you by design. It is telling you what it needs. And because we have been raised in this culture where we feel like we need to compete with men and we need to do all these things that men can do, we forget our own design. And so again, in this sense, it's just think of yourself, like I said, in two different modes. And when you are, if you are struggling to seek rest, if you're struggling to just love on yourself, perhaps consider it from the lens that this is not you being lazy. This is not you being unproductive. This is you essentially nurturing a side of your business that's going to make you more productive and use the energy that's about to come flowing with your flow.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much for kind of diving into that with us, because I think that is important. Because like I said, this whole conversation came up because JJ posted something on Instagram and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired right now. Like, I don't want to do anything. I don't feel motivated to do anything. I just want to like snuggle up with a blanket and yeah, just like take a nap or read a book or do something that's just more for me. And not like, not that you guys know I love serving people, but there's times where I'm like, I just can't serve anymore and I just need to refill my bucket, if you will. And that's a lot. Also, why Natalie and I, we love talking about operating in a spirit of rest, and that rest is not just in when your spirit is in alignment with God and you have that peace that surpasses understanding, but it's also a physical operating in physical rest as well. Like we need both sides of the coin there. And so understanding what our bodies are doing and why will help, like she said, help you be more productive in your business. And as entrepreneurs, I know not everybody has the ability right now. Like some people listening may still have full-time jobs and have, a side business going, but you can still, when I was working full-time, I could still pick and choose. When was I going to do a workshop? When was I going to do a Facebook Live? When was I going to, do a team event or a team meeting? The more awareness you have over your cycle and what season you're in your cycle, the more you can be in control of, okay, I know like I'm going to have more energy. I'm going to be able to show up more and be in front of people. So this is when we're going to do our, like maybe a team event that you need to do, or a workshop or whatever, or a training. And then on like the fall winter seasons of your flow, maybe that's when you're just doing more messages or kind of more admin type work, or just things that you don't necessarily have to like put a lot of energy or focus into. It's just kind of like, let's check these back office type things off. And so I just think or even just understanding, okay, I know I'm not going to be as high energy, so I'm just going to do one thing that maybe is going to exert my energy, and the rest of my to-do list is going to be a little bit lower today. So we're just trying to bring awareness to this conversation and awareness to your body so that one, you understand why are you feeling unmotivated or low energy, and it's not because you're a bad entrepreneur or a bad mom or a bad coworker or whatever. It is because your body's literally doing major things and it is just trying to conserve energy so it can do what God designed it to do. And so the more you're aware of that, the more, like JJ was saying, like the more productive you can be when you have those high energy seasons. And then when you're in those low energy seasons, you can shift. So going back to the whole wellness thing, I think about workout routines, like doing more yoga or like stretching on the light or like the fall, winter seasons. And if you're like a weightlifter, doing more of the HIIT workouts, the more intense workouts in the summer and spring. And I think sometimes we push our bodies to do things that they're not designed to do in certain seasons. And so that's just why we had this whole conversation. I really do hope that this is benefiting you who are listening to this. And, please reach out to JJ, follow her on Instagram is where she primarily hangs out and has like awesome content. So JJ, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience before we wrap up?
Well, I want to say thank you again, Brandie, for everything that you're doing here, for inspiring so many and all your encouraging words. You've been such a blessing in my life, and I really appreciate you. And just lastly, I guess if anybody's been stuck around here with this conversation, just remember that we have been led to believe that our periods are just this isolated event that happens, and or more than anything, it has to happen. And I'd like to encourage you to think of it as maybe you being empowered over it.
Right.
This is not something that is happening to you. It's just it is something that it is you. And it has so many gifts if we learn how to reframe what we've been told all our lives about our periods. I repeat, this is not about making babies. This is about your health. The way that you experience your menstruation is a reflection of how you're going to experience menopause and your life in general. So it is very, very important that we start to pay attention. And in this road, I understand that we're probably likely to hit roads if we're trying to consult some medical professionals, because I repeat, not a lot of us are being trained in medical schools of the importance of this, but we are going through a shift as I speak, in which soon, if you're very, very, very young, I imagine that your children, perhaps even your grandchildren, are gonna have a different type of access in medical care once this gets out. So just think of us as being in the very, very early stages of a period revolution. So this is going to change medical care. Right now, like this, the talk about checking your cervical mucus and checking your basal body temperature may sound extreme and like too much work, but in some years, your grandchildren are gonna think of this as just normal everyday activities. So if you're curious, if you're wanting to learn more, like Brandie said, feel free to reach out, send me a DM, tell me that you came from the podcast, and I'd love to chat and just see how else I can assist you in your fertility journey. So thank you, Brandie, again.
Yes, thank you so much. And I wanted to piggyback on one thing that you just said, is like our bodies are beautiful. They are designed fearfully and wonderfully made. They were knit together in our mother's wombs. Like God did not create us on accident, and everything that is a part of us is not by accident, it's by divine design. And so especially in I think the Christian culture, we are made to kind of feel like we are unclean, or like there's like parts of us that are disgusting. And the more I've actually been learning about my cycle, is the more I like am falling in love with my body and God design of what it is, of this body that he's given me, to respect it and to love it and to take care of it like it is the temple of the Holy Spirit. And so I just want to encourage you guys, if you've been raised in that, like I was raised, like the thought of cervical mucus like totally grossed me out at the beginning, the thought of tracking, a temperature or anything like that. And it's really not as hard. And it's actually really easy once you get educated on it, and it's not scary, but it's, like she said, it's so empowering because now I know when my cycle is. I just know the seasons of my cycle, and it is helping me with scheduling my business out, or vacations, or events that I may be doing within my business. But it's also just helping me just fall more in love with the design that God created me to be. So I just wanted to piggyback on that topic because I just remember growing up, like how gross it was, or like what you're not supposed to talk about it. And so now that we are getting more education, and more quality education on this topic, like I think the awareness is key right now. So yeah, I just I just had to say that one more thing.
I love it.
But thank you so much, JJ, for joining me, and thank you guys for hanging out with us on this topic that is definitely not our normal conversation here at Rise Your Purpose, but I think it is just as important as any of the other conversations that we've had on this podcast. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We would love to hear from you. So please share your takeaways by tagging @LiveVictorious over on Instagram and leave a review.
This will help us get more visibility and reach more women like you for the kingdom. We appreciate you and are praying for you as you shine your light in the business world and rise to your purpose.